I want to say welcome to everybody that's here today in Oklahoma City. So glad that you are here and at Servant's Heart Chapel in Clovis, New Mexico. They're joining us today, and we're so glad that they are here as well. If you're here or if you're there in Clovis, would you give a round of applause and just welcome your brothers and sisters in the Lord this morning? All right. We're so glad to have you and glad to have them. And we are going to look into the book of Luke today, chapter 11. If you got a Bible, you can go there. Or if you'd like to follow along, all the scripture will be on the PowerPoint and in your handout as well, if you'd like to take notes. I want to talk to you today about faith, on the subject faith that doesn't quit. Faith that just doesn't quit. I want to give you a picture today, a story that Jesus told that has just wrecked me, okay? That has just tore up my world and flipped it upside down and beat on it a little bit, and then hopefully I'll never quite be the same. I want to give you a story that Jesus told. What he did is he told this story in response to some things that were happening in what he was teaching the disciples, and he told some stories for this purpose. He said, I want you to learn to pray and not give up. He said, I want you to learn to pray and not give up. And this is one of the stories that he told. Luke chapter 11, verse 5. He said to them, suppose one of you has a friend, and he goes to him at midnight and says, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, because a friend of mine on a journey has come to me, and I have nothing to set before him. Now let me just stop right there, and let me ask you this question. Are you convinced that you are unable to meet your own needs? Now, before you answer too quickly to that, I want you to process that just a little bit. Because most of the time, I'll be honest with you, I'm a guy that thinks and plans and has a plan and has an opinion, and I always think my opinion's right. Everybody say amen. Because if I didn't think my opinion was right, I'd have another opinion, right? I'd believe something else if I didn't think that was right. That's just it's personality. It's the way it goes. And it can be a strength and it can be a weakness. Yeah. And I'll just be honest with you, I've always got an idea of what I ought to do. Well, I ought to do this and this and this and this and this. And if I do this and this and this, why everything, this and this and this should just work out fine. You know what I'm saying? You always have this idea of what we ought to do. But God has begun teaching me something. And that is that I am powerless to meet my own needs. No matter how good I am, no matter how gifted I might be in some things, I'm not in a lot of things, but there's a few things God made me good at. He made you good at some things too. And no matter how good you are powerless, and I am powerless to meet my own needs. In fact, this story that Jesus is telling, this would have been a very embarrassing thing in this culture. This is a long time ago, and so let's just imagine for a minute. This never happens, but let's just imagine for a minute. Bo comes over late at night. All right, he comes over to my house late at night. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, let's go with midnight, because that's the time it is in this story. All right, and so Bo had a friend. Shoot him. No, I'm not going to shoot him. I'm not going to shoot Bo. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. I'm going to look out the little peephole when I hear somebody beating on my door. I'm going to look out the door through the little peephole, and I'm going to see, oh, it's Bo. And I'm going to crack the door open, because I've already been asleep. And I'm going to say, what can I help you with? Now, let's imagine Bo's got a friend, and that friend came to him, and he's got nothing to feed him. He just shows up at your house, Bo. He's been on a long trip, and he comes in, he said, man, I hadn't seen you in years. How you doing? I didn't even know you were coming. Remember, there were no cell phones back in these days, right? Like if you just pop in, and you might not have any idea that somebody's coming. In this culture, it was very, very impolite not to take care of someone who was your guest. Somebody comes into your home, you better take care of them. You're responsible to feed them. If they're out of food after a long journey, you got to feed them. Give them something to drink. Take care of them. You have a place for them. In fact, if it meant giving up your room or your bed, that's what you do, and you take care of your guests, because that was the culture. So Bo's got a friend, and he comes to him at midnight, and he says, man, I'm just starved. Is there anything I can do for you? I'm just starved after this long trip. In fact, I ran out of food 2 or 3 days ago and haven't had anything to eat. And so Bo's like, oh man, I got nothing. I don't have any money to go to the store. Plus all the local corner stores closed. And I know Daryl. Lizzie fixes good food. Maybe she's got something in this. That's right, and she's got something in the fridge. Let's go. So he goes and he pounds on the door. And I say, man, what's going on, Bo? Man, I got this friend, Daryl. He came to me at midnight, and my pantry is empty. My fridge is, I got nothing. And the store's closed. And plus, even if it was open, I don't have any money right now. And it's just until payday. I can't help him. And you ever notice that people come to you on a long journey? Now, I'm not talking about a friend that comes to you because we know we got Walmart and we got this and we got that that's open 24 hours. And But have you ever noticed that spiritually, people come to you on a long journey and they're hungry? You know what I'm talking about? If you don't, you live long enough and you will. You try to help enough people and you'll start to understand. All of a sudden, somebody comes to you like they did this week to me and say, Daryl, my wife, I just found out that she's pregnant and I'm not the dad. What do you do? What do you say? Like, man, you know what I'm saying? The pantry's empty. And sometimes there's just nothing to say. You don't have, there's no magic formula. There's not a certain verse you can spout off and it's suddenly going to fix that. What do you do? What do you do when the person across the street from you is messing their life up with drugs? What do you do? What do you do when they come to you and they say, man, I am just trashing my life? I'm saying, what can you tell me? What am I supposed to do? What do you say? You know what I'm saying? The cupboards are empty, y'all. I got nothing on my own. As if I'm going to spout off the right words and suddenly they're just going to be, oh, thank you, Daryl. It's just all better now. No, they're on a long journey. And sometimes you and I, just all the time, you and I have nothing on our own to be able to help. Not on our own. Long journey. So I'm going to go to verse 7. Next slide. It says this, then the one inside answers, don't bother me. The door is already locked and my children are with me in bed. Or in other words, my children and I are in bed. I can't give up and give you anything. So this person comes to you on a long journey, and you don't know what to say. Your cupboards are empty and you say, God, you got to help me. And God says no. No, really. He's talking about prayer. That's the analogy. And he's saying, you ask, and God says, no. Now, I don't like that verse. Okay? In fact, if God would let me take an eraser and erase one verse out of the Bible, this just might be the one. I don't like that at all. Why? Why does God say no? Is it because He doesn't love me? Is it because He just doesn't care? It's because maybe He doesn't want to help me. Maybe it's not His will. Maybe He just wants to do something else. Maybe He doesn't want to save that person. Maybe He doesn't want to save that marriage. Maybe He just doesn't want to change that life. I've had guys sit in my kitchen and say, Daryl, do you think maybe that some people are just destined to go to hell? No, I don't. But it does make you struggle sometimes, doesn't it? You pray for somebody and they don't change. How many know what I'm talking about? Can I see your hands? Yeah, we know. What is going on? Why aren't you answering me? And you get frustrated. You get aggravated with God. What does faith look like in that moment? Now look at this. Look at the next verse here. I cannot get up and give you anything. Now watch this. He says, I tell you, verse 8, though he will not get up and give him the bread because he is his friend. Now I want to push pause right there. And let me just tell you something. Do you know that there are some prayers God will not answer for you because you are a Christian? Did you know that? Did you know there are some prayers God will not answer for you just because you're a Christian? Oh, well, I mean, they're a Christian, so I mean, He will not get up and give anything to him because he is his friend. The relationship, in other words, is not always enough. Why? Well, there are some things you wouldn't give your child, right? Just because they're your child. Right. Am I right? All you parents say amen. You know, there's some things you wouldn't give your child just because they are your child, okay? He will not get up and give him anything, give him the bread because he is his friend. In other words, just because you can't go to God and say, God, I'm a Christian, I am your daughter, your son, and plus I attend the Bible Methodist Church. You can't do it, all right? That's not a magic, swipe card to get you in. What about this? What will make God answer? Look at the last part of this. Yet, he will not give it because he's his friend, but yet because of the man's boldness, he will get up and give him as much as he needs. Now let's go back to imagining that Bo is at my door at midnight. And I say, look, Bo, man, I'm dead asleep. I'm so tired. I got to get up early in the morning. I got stuff to do. Man, just come back in the morning. Come back tomorrow. I'll give you whatever you want tomorrow. I can't give anything now. If I get out and start rattling around the kitchen, the kids are going to wake up. I can't I'll see you. And I close the door. Deadbolt. And I take about 2 steps away from the door, and all of a sudden, okay, now you see where I'm going with that, right? Daryl, open this door. I've got a friend, and I don't have anything. I won't take no for an answer. Give me some of Lizzie's cooking. I said no. Go to sleep, Bo. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, what kind of, let's be honest, you may not be the most polite person in the world, but if you knocked on a door at midnight and they were like, man, I can't give you anything tonight, come back in the morning, you'd probably be like, oh, okay, man, sorry. All right, sorry. I'm sorry to bother you. I'll be back here. What time did you want me to come? Okay, this is the way we would do it. We'd sneak off, so I'm like, sorry. That's the way we tend to do it. But not this guy. What kind of idiot, after somebody says no, says, I'm going to stand here and beat on this door until you give me something, because I'm not leaving. Both saying me. Yeah, it's you. Yeah, all right. What kind of bold, audacious persistence is that? You see, this is what boldness is in this context. It's not just courage. It's like audacious persistence, in your face. I'm not taking no for an answer. Woo. The old word, if you're using King James Version this morning, the old word for this was importunity. Importunity, boldness, audacious, in-your-face persistence. And I'll tell you this, to get that, you're going to have to be conscious that your cupboards are bare. To get that kind of boldness, you're going to have to be aware that you can't do this by yourself. You're going to have to suddenly be struck with your own poverty. I've got 5 kids. Not one of them is allowed to be lost. I'm not okay with 4 out of 5, 80%, right? No. But it's hard to raise kids to love Jesus. I can't do that by myself. They're on a long journey. They're on an 18, 20, 30-year journey. And I can't do that by myself. My cupboard is empty when it comes to raising kids and leaving a legacy so that when I'm dead and gone and already in heaven, they want to go there. Right. Doing that kind of thing with all the stuff around them in the world. I want my kids to love Jesus and serve Him and sacrifice for Him and pour out their lives for Him. And if God calls them the deepest, darkest Africa and I don't ever see them again, I want them to love Jesus and teach about Him and preach about Him until someday I see Him in heaven. Right. Okay? Whatever it is, whatever God wants for my kids, that's what I want for my kids. And I can't lead them to do that. I'm not that good. Right. And you know what? You're not either. You're not that good. My cupboard's empty. I need God's help. And so I knock on the door and I say, I got to have your help. Look at my son. Look at my daughter. Look at the attitude they're copping right now. Look at the rebelliousness. Look at the hard-heartedness right now. Don't tell me your kids ain't that way sometimes. Mine are. Look at my people in my church. Lord, look at what's going on. Look at the foolishness and You're my people. I love you. Look at the sin. Look at the distraction. Look at the addiction. Look at the chains and the bondage. I'm not okay with that. And then it looks like to me the next week nothing's changed. God said no. What do you do? What do you do when it looks like the answer is no? Wilma did not have much of a start in life, and not a good start at all. In fact, she, at young age, she had polio, and the disease left her left leg crooked and her foot twisted inward, so she had to wear leg braces. After several years of painful, difficult therapy, she learned to walk without the brace. Her leg straightened enough to where she could walk without the brace. At age 12, Wilma tried out for a girls' basketball team, and she failed. She messed up. She didn't make it. So she went, she practiced with one of her female friends and 2 boys every single day she played basketball. The next year, she went back, she made the team. During a game, a college track coach was watching when she played, and he talked her into letting him train her as a runner. So Wilma Rudolph is her name, Wilma Rudolph. By age 14, she was outrunning sprinters in the United States. In 1956, she made the U.S. Olympic team. But she didn't do well. She didn't perform well at all. In fact, she showed very poorly. The bitter disappointment of that sent her back to work even harder. And in 1960, she went back to the Olympics when they were in Rome, and she won 3 gold medals. At that time, the most a woman had ever won. Persistence in the face of failure. Boldness that says, oh yeah? Back to the drawing board. Back to the workout room. Back to the prayer room. Yes. I'm not okay. I'm not okay with failure. I'm not okay with these people being lost. Right. I'm not okay with my children being lost. I'm not okay. I'm not okay with the bondage in my life. I am not okay with this addiction. I am not okay with that sinful habit. I'm not okay. I'm going back to prayer when God says no. So let me tell you this. The next slide, if you're taking notes, says this. One of the most important things about your prayer life, if you don't get anything else I say today, get this, all right? One of the most important things about your prayer life is what you do after God says no. Or after it seems like God says no. Maybe you may not hear a no from heaven. But after it seems like I prayed about that and God did nothing, what do you do then? That is one of the most important things about your faith and your prayer life. It is. What are you going to do after it seems like I asked and God said no? In that moment, that's very, very important. Sometimes, you see, if you're taking notes on your handout, sometimes God says no because it is not His will. Sometimes He does, okay? There are times where if you pray that God will help you win the lottery, God's going to say no, and it's because it's not His will. All right? And it could be that if you ask God for a giant house or a big fancy car, it might be that God says no because He knows it might not be good for you. Okay? I know that's true, and you know that's true. It might be. It could be that sometimes you ask God for that certain job, and God in His wisdom looks at that job and says, down the road, there's a situation that would develop, and I'm going to say no because I know it would be bad for them. Okay? That's possible. Sometimes God says no because it would hurt you. And that's basically what I'm talking about there. If He says, spiritually this would be bad for them, He sometimes says no for that reason. But sometimes God says no to see if you'll grow. Grow in faith. Grow in persistence. You know what I'm talking about if you ever raised a kid. If you've ever raised a kid, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you have to let them struggle through something because if you don't let them struggle through it, they never grow. You know what I'm talking about? If you don't let them struggle through some difficult situation or some hard school assignment, if you do their homework for them all the time, they don't learn anything. You know what I'm saying? You can't just hand it to them all the time. God knows that about you too. And sometimes, let's be honest, if we just said, God, please give me a better job, and all of a sudden your phone rang and you picked it up, and they said, hi, we were just wondering if you'd come work for us. We're going to start you off at $27 an hour. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that spoil you? Yes, it would. It would. You see, sometimes it wouldn't reform your character. It wouldn't make you the person that you need to be. It would just be, it'd be kind of like me always giving my kids exactly what they want to eat. Yeah. Or giving me exactly what I want to eat. That's right. I see this. I see some people mouthing that. Yeah, all right. Me too. If I just ate what I wanted to eat all the time, I would eat nothing but barbecue all the time. All right. And that would be terrible for me. But it'd be really good for a little while, all right? That sounds amazing. My stomach is growling now that I think about it. Barbecue. Yeah, barbecue. Let's just all stop and think about barbecue. No, let's not. Let's focus. Sometimes God says no because He wants to see if you will grow. That's just the cold, hard facts. There's a story, John Killinger tells a story in the Atlantic Monthly. He told that there was in the days back of the great western cattle ranches, sometimes they would have a method of breaking a wild horse. And they needed to calm him down. And so what they would do is they would attach that horse and tie him together with a little burro, a little stubborn donkey. And the horse, then they would let him go. And that horse would just go nuts. I mean, jerking around and dragging that poor little donkey along. And they'd disappear like a tornado over the horizon, just... But he said they might be gone for several days. Him dragging that little burro along. But he said eventually Maybe a few days later, first you'd see a spot out there on the horizon. And as it got closer, you'd see a little burro trotting back home. And following along behind him, you'd see a horse that had learned that sometimes you have to let somebody else lead because they just won't give up. Now, you don't have to be the smartest, brightest, best, but sometimes to do well in prayer and in faith, you don't have to be, which ought to be a huge relief to every one of us we're not the sharpest knife in the drawer, or the most gifted person in this room. All right? Maybe you say, "Phew, man, I just don't feel like I can do anything or be anything." Let me tell you something. All you got to do is be a little donkey and stick with it for a while and persist in prayer. God, I asked you yesterday and I haven't seen anything, and so today, here I am again. And I'm not quitting until I receive from you, because I know that this is your will. Now be careful. I understand being careful. We're going to talk about that in a minute, okay? I know in the back of everybody's mind right now is this thing like, what does he mean we can just insist? I'm not going to quit until I get a Cadillac. We'll talk about that in a minute, all right? Okay. So let me ask you, do you understand this next? If you're taking notes, the next thing is there's a lot of difference between praying for the convenience of me and praying for the glory of God. Okay? There's a lot of difference between praying for the glory of God and praying for the convenience of me. There's a lot of difference between those two. God is not first and most interested that He make your life easy. I hate to break it to you. He's just not. Okay? He is more concerned that you be holy and be pure and be a righteous man, a righteous woman, a woman of strength and character, a man of courage and character and strength and persistence and faith. He is more concerned about that than He is about giving you just what you want, just because He's not a vending machine. So here's how we pray for the glory of God. If what you are asking is for the glory of God, don't stop asking till He gives it. I'll say it again. If what you're praying for is for the glory of God, never stop asking until He gives it. Is it for the glory of God to save your family? Say yes. Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So don't stop asking until they're saved. Don't stop believing until they're saved. Is it for God's glory to grow this church? Yes, it is. And I will not stop asking until He gives it. I will. I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to pray again tomorrow morning. In fact, let me tell you what my determination is, okay? From this story, here's my application to this story. This is for me. This is what it looks like for me. For you, maybe it looks just a little bit different. But I have decided that since I'm knocking on this door and God is not yet answering all the prayers that I'm praying, I have decided that I'm going to stand right here and I'm not going to quit, and I'm going to knock until my knuckles bleed. And then when they're bleeding and they're too sore, I'm going to knock with the other knuckles. And then when those are too sore, I'm going to knock with this hand. And then when that one's too sore because those knuckles are bleeding, I'm going to knock with the other ones. And then when my hands are too tired, I'm going to kick the door until I can't kick it anymore. And then when I'm too tired to do that, I'm going to lay on the ground and scream, but I'm not leaving. Okay? I'm not quitting. I will not. Some of you are not saved yet. Some of you are not Christians, but you will be. You will be. Because I'm not leaving. I'm at God's door and I'm asking Him to save you and change you and make you more than you ever thought you could possibly be for God. I got people that are not here this morning I was hoping would be here. But I'm not leaving. You see, tomorrow morning I'm going to get back up and I'm going to pull out my prayer list. Because I'm going to stay here and I'm not leaving. Now, I know some of you are wondering about, what about submission prayer? What about that, Darrell? What about not my will but thine be done? What about that? Well, if you're taking notes, here's a quote from Charles Finney, all right? Charles Finney said this. He said, "Let us be careful not to confuse submission to the will of God with indifference to the will of God." Now, I'm going to say it again because you might not have got that the first time by, all right? He said, let us be careful not to confuse submission to the will of God with indifference to the will of God. You know what I'm talking about, right? Submission to the will of God is a different thing from, well, I guess just whatever God does, I don't really care. He can do whatever He wants. That's indifference. That's not, you don't start with indifference and get boldness in prayer. You don't do that. You don't start with, well, I mean, just whatever will be, will be. You don't start with that attitude and get boldness in prayer. Not the kind of boldness I'm talking about. You don't do it. Well, I guess if they're going to get saved, they're going to get saved. Nope. You don't start from that place and get boldness. You don't. Because that's indifference to the will of God. It's basically like, meh. Whatever God does, He's going to do. I guess I can't really impact it. I would tell you, what about the kind of boldness that knocks on the door and then won't quit knocking on the door? God said, no, well, guess what? I'm going to keep on knocking. I'm not talking about trying to twist God's arm behind His back. I'm talking about the kind of boldness that says, no, I know that what you have is what I need. What I need is behind this door, and I'm not leaving. Boldness like that. Charles Finney tells the story of a man who came to a revival, and I quote, he wrote this. He said, he was shocked when he heard the people praying as though they would not be denied. And he kept insisting on the importance of praying with submission when it was plain that he confused submission with indifference. Praying as though they would not be denied. I will not be denied. God is going to do something in our city, in our church, in this place for His honor and for His glory. He is going to do something in Destination Lifehouse, Melissa. He is. Because I'm not quitting. I will not stop. For His honor and His glory, He's going to change. He's going to break the chains of some addicts. He's going to do it. He's going to set some people free. He's going to save some kids. He's going to save some teenagers. He's going to save some adults. He's going to save some of your neighbors. Because you and I won't quit. He's going to mend some relationships. He's going to put some pieces back together again because we won't quit. Submission. So what is submission to the will of God? All right. If you're taking notes, let's go to the next slide. Submission to the will of God is this. Submission is what happens when God's will is revealed to be something else other than what you're praying for. Okay? When it is revealed to be something other than what you're praying for. Let me see if I can illustrate. A couple of different things. One is the story of Jesus, all right? Jesus goes into the garden. He's praying. Oh, Lord, if it's possible, what? What does He say? Let this cup pass from me, right? If it's possible, God, don't make me go through this cross. Don't make me carry the weight of the sins of all the world. If there's any other way, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Then what does He say? Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. What's He saying? You see, God had already revealed His will. God had already said, your path is to that cross. He already said that. Jesus said, if it's possible, let it pass. Let this pass from me, but nevertheless, not what I want, but what you want. You know what I'm saying? All right. What about, there's another story in the Old Testament. David committed adultery with Bathsheba. She became pregnant. David had her husband, Bathsheba's husband Uriah, killed, arranged it in battle far away so that he was killed. Then David marries Bathsheba. God knows all about it and says, David, you've sinned, and I'm going to take the life of this child. He said, the child will not live. And David goes and lays on his face before God when the child becomes ill, lays on his face before God, will not eat, will not take a bath, will not get up. He lays on his face and prays for 7 days and 7 nights. He falls asleep praying, he wakes up praying. It's just, that's what he does for 7 days. He is broken over this child. Please, he said, let the child live. It wasn't the child's fault. He's pleading with God. You know what happens next? The child dies. And the servants, when the child is dead, they're standing like outside David's room, and he can see them. They can see him. They're looking at it. He's still laying in there. Man, what are we going to do? Like, if he's this broken when the child's alive, what is he going to do when we tell him it's dead? And they're kind of freaked out. They're like, David's going to flip, man. He's going to go off the deep end. And so they're standing there, and David sees them whispering, and he says, what is it that you have to tell me? And they said, the child is dead. And David said, all right. And he got up, went and washed his face, went and ate something. And they were like, what's this about? You know what it was? It was submission to the will of God. It was submission to the will of God. Okay, God, if that's what you're going to do, what a beautiful picture. He says, I'm going to just humble myself and say, and here's what they said. They said, why are you doing this? And he said, I thought that while the child was still alive, who knows, perhaps the Lord will hear and be merciful. What's he saying? He's saying, I have lived my whole life leaning into the mercy of God. Just leaning into the mercy of God, and I'm just trusting that He could yet still be merciful. Maybe He'll change His mind. But when God didn't change His mind, He got up and He moved on. That is submission to the will of God. You can be bold and stand here and knock, and if God says, it is not my will, okay, I don't want you to have that job, I'm going to close that door. I will not take this sickness from you, okay? God many times will heal people. Many times He will. Sometimes He will not. Sometimes He knows that what somebody around you needs to see is not a miraculous healing, but a miraculous empowering in the middle of pain. Am I making sense to you? Sometimes what somebody around you needs to see is that a person can go through pain and still be a Christian, still have a heart full of praise, still be thankful to the Lord. Sometimes that's the truth. And so sometimes God allows that to happen in your life. So what do you do in that moment? You can pray and seek Him, but when God reveals it's not my will, then you say, all right, and you move on. That's submission. But let's not get submission way back here at the beginning like, I prayed one time and God didn't do it, so I guess, whatever, I'm just not going to talk about it anymore. He already knows what I want. No! That's not boldness. Prayer, faith that never quits, looks like standing there and I'm not leaving. Make sense? Okay. There's a story about Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was a president of the United States. If you don't know your American history, he was a stubborn, hard-nosed guy. And some of his boyhood friends just could not understand how he became a famous general. Old Hickory, they called him. Tough as Hickory, they said. How did he become a famous general and then go on to be president of the United States? They knew of other men who had greater talent than Andrew Jackson. In fact, one of Jackson's friends said this. He said, why, Jim Brown, who lived right down the road from Jackson, was not only smarter, but he could throw Andy Jackson 3 times out of 4 in a wrestling match. But look where Andy is now. One of his other friends responded and they said this. They said, why did you say he could throw him 3 times out of 4? Don't they usually just go 3 times and then you're done? And he said, well, sure, they were supposed to, but Andy just never would quit. You see, he said he would never admit that he was beat. He just never stayed throwed. You could throw him, but he never stayed throwed. There it is, right? That's why. So I'm talking to some people right here. It's been rough. It's been hard. And you've been throwed. And you've been throwed more than once. And here you are on the ground. And I just want to tell you, don't stay throwed. The question is not whether or not God answered your prayer the first time. The question is whether you're going to stay throwed or whether you're going to get up and say, I'm coming back for more. That's boldness. That's boldness. Let me give you this. Let me give you this illustration. I've shared it before, I believe. But let me tell you the story of a man. At age 22, this man failed in business. He went into business and his business crashed and burned. Age 22. At age 23, he decided he might try to get into politics, and he ran for legislature and was beaten. He failed again in business at age 24, started another business and it went under. At age 25, he was elected to the legislature. At age 26, his sweetheart died. At age 27, he had a nervous breakdown. At age 29, he was defeated for speaker in the legislature. At age 31, he was defeated for elector, the Electoral College. At age 34, he was defeated for Congress. Then at age 37, he was elected to Congress. Then at age 39, he was beaten again for Congress, kicked out after just 2 years. At age 46, he was defeated for Senate. At age 47, he lost in a race for vice president. At age 49, he was defeated for the Senate again. And at age 51, he was elected President of the United States. You say, who am I talking about? Let's put a picture up, shall we? Abraham Lincoln. Now, you might not have known all of that, but there's another guy that just wouldn't stay throwed. And you know what? His life story prepared him for a moment when at the crucial turning point of our country, where we were literally ripped apart by states' rights and slavery into two countries, and a great civil war erupted that claimed more lives at that time as a portion of the population than any other event in United States history. And this guy stood up and became the man who led us through it, who took us through it, and just didn't have the sense to quit. Just didn't stay throwed. He couldn't be beaten because he'd been there, he'd lost over and over and over again, and now he won. And so I want to tell you this. Let's go on to the next verse, all right? And let me read you what it says, what Jesus said right after this. Luke 11:9 and following. So I say to you, ask, and it will be given you. And in Greek, this is something you won't see in English, but in Greek, that's asking, it will be given you. In other words, it's this ongoing, in asking, it will be given you. Seek, in seeking, you will find. Knock, in knocking, the door will be opened to you. For whoever asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks the door will be opened. For which of your fathers, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake instead? Or if he asks for an egg, will give him a scorpion? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will the Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask Him? Now I want you to notice something. What you need most may not be what you think you need most, if you're taking notes. What you think you need most may not be what you need most, may not be what you think you need most. What you really need most is the Holy Spirit in your life. That's what you need. You see, it may be that God says, what I want to do with them is not allow them to go have an easy road always. It may be that. The question is, will you stay and will you push through in prayer? It may be that God says, I don't want to take that sickness from them. Instead, I'm going to allow them to push through it and be an example of my grace. could be that. On the other hand, will you stay there and persist in prayer and keep on asking even when it feels like God may have said no? There's a story about Paderewski, the famous Polish pianist. He was once scheduled to perform at a great American concert hall, huge concert hall in front of hundreds and hundreds of people. In the audience was a mother with a little 9-year-old boy. And that little 9-year-old boy was just, as 9-year-old boys will do, was just kind of fidgety, and he was tired of waiting for this concert to start. And so while his mother turned her back, he ran off, slipped away, and went up on the stage. Walks out on the stage under the lights, and everybody's looking at him, and he walked over to the piano, and he began playing the little song Chopsticks. Started playing the little song Chopsticks. Have you ever heard that? Just little simple notes, not very much. The audience began to kind of the rumbling, get that boy off the stage. What's he doing? Whose boy is that? What? Rumbling spread through the audience. But the pianist backstage heard something going on. And he peeked out and he saw the little boy on the stage. And quickly he slipped out from behind the curtain, walked up behind the little boy, and leaned down and whispered in his ear. And reaching around him on both sides, he began to improvise a piece around him on both sides. He improvised a little running bass note on the left and began to add little trills and fills up above on both sides of the little boy, and kept whispering in his ear. And they played a duet to the delight of the audience. And when they were done, there was a standing ovation. Everybody cheered and shouted, and the little boy got back down off the stage and made his way back to his mother. And she leaned down and she said, "What?" She said, "Please don't do that again," first of all. But she said, it was so beautiful. You did such a great job. She said, "I saw the piano player whispering to you. What was he telling you?" And the little boy said, "Oh, he was just saying, just keep playing, just keep playing, just keep playing." Now, I would tell you this. I think if you would tune in this morning, I know you feel disappointed about something that God hasn't given you, that you thought was coming. I know that's where you are, because we're all there. At some place in our life, we're all there. But I think if you tune in this morning, I think you'll hear the great composer of the sky saying, "Let me take the little bit of music that you've got and let me reach around and let me add in what I've got. Just don't you stop playing. Just don't you quit. Because I'm going to take what little you have and I'm going to pour in the Holy Spirit to your life, and I'm going to make it something bigger and better and more beautiful and more powerful than you could possibly accomplish on your own." Don't quit playing. Don't stop. So let me ask this. What about you? The last blank on your handout. What if we all agreed, you know what? I'm not stopping praying. I'm going to double my prayer time. Ha! Take that, devil. I'm not quitting. I'm coming back. I'm not walking away. I've got nothing. I've got empty cupboards. I can't meet this need. I'm not leaving. What if you repented of all the times you've given up too easily in prayer? Maybe some things you hadn't prayed for in about a month or 2 months because God, it seemed like He said no, and you just kind of gave up. By the way, prayer list. It's a great tool. It's a great tool. Keep a little list. Stick it in your Bible. Keep a list. Reminds you not to lose it and slip away from it. What if we never gave up until we received? What if we were a church that never gave up until we received the answer that God has for us? Would you stand together with me and let's bow our heads for prayer?